In this video, I will be presenting evidence for persistence of consciousness after physical death. I'm presenting this evidence from the perspective of a scientist and atheist, because that is what I was for about 25 years. I have a PhD in a quantitative field, and for most of my adult life, I've been an atheist, believing that due to a few university courses and a couple degrees, somehow I know everything about the universe. And it turns out I was wrong. And I want to present the physical evidence that I've witnessed personally, which enabled me to conclude that there is persistence of consciousness after physical death. In later videos in this series, which I'll be releasing about once per month, I will describe how I got from that point to my belief in God and Jesus Christ. But I don't want to make that jump from atheism to Christianity, because almost 100% of my listeners will close this video if I were to do that. And you cannot believe in God or Jesus if you cannot accept that there is persistence of consciousness after physical death. And note, I'm not even using the word soul here. In later videos, we can use that word. So let's begin. In or about the third grade, I awoke late one night when living in a log cabin, purportedly the oldest cabin in the village I grew up in. And I found a glowing apparition of a woman standing at the foot of my bed. Now, even in the third grade, if a child has a dream that they got chased by a crocodile, they're going to tell their parents the next day, "Oh, I got chased by a crocodile in my dream last night." On the other hand, if they got chased by a dog walking home from school in the real world, they're going to say, "I got chased by a dog." In other words, in the third grade, you already know the difference between a dream memory and a real memory. And to me, this was definitely a real memory. Some additional evidence was I pulled my head under the covers and pulled the covers over my head and passed out when this happened. And I woke up the next morning and my head was still firmly under the covers, and I never slept that way. That wasn't enough, of course, to convince me that there was persistence of consciousness after physical death. I just stuck that in the cupboard and went on with my life as an atheist, which my parents had taught me to be. Fast forward, call it over a decade, into my late teens, early 20s. And I had some questionable friends, one of whom at the time was a self-professed Satanist. Now, I was an atheist at the time, but this man proclaimed to be a Satanist, and he had his textbook, which he used to guide us to construct a Ouija board. Now, we didn't go buy a Ouija board from Toys R Us, which incredibly they apparently sell. We made a Ouija board, and we made it using this textbook as a guide, and it was quite legitimate without going into the gory details of how we made it. When playing around with this board, the spirit that we made contact with kept referring to itself as Mom-O or Momo, which I thought was a really strange name. And I thought maybe its name was Mom. It kept going back to the last O by mistake. And I commented as such, "Oh, Momo, what a weird name." About 3 decades later, when I was doing some research, I discovered there was an oft-encountered spirit on Ouija boards named Zozo. It's quite famous in Ouija board lore, and sometimes it calls itself Zaza or Mama. I've never actually heard anyone else say it called itself Momo, but it's quite likely that's what it was trying to communicate to us, was its name was Zozo. And we also looked at a standard board layout, and the Z is right below the M on a standard board layout. So that was interesting, but that was certainly not the evidence that I'm talking about here, although it's a little piece of it. The bigger evidence, before I get to the biggest evidence from this, was I had a roommate at the time who was not participating, was not interested, and was in his room reading. And the group of us playing with this board left the house for about an hour. And when we came home, my roommate was gone. When he came back, he said that he had heard this sound of the Ouija board planchette spinning around the board, which, by the way, was a drinking glass we were using, was spinning around the board really loud. So he thought we must have come back, and he walked into the living room. And as soon as he walked in the living room, the sound stopped. And of course, we were gone. I'll call that indirect evidence. I mean, I wasn't there at the time. I'm taking his word for it. Although didn't seem like he was joking around when he came back and told us that. But about an hour later, I had experienced some direct evidence. And that is when me and my hubris as an atheist, self-proclaimed scientist, although at that time I was a university dropout, I hadn't yet gone back to school. Nevertheless, I felt myself quite scientific, and I was a very extreme skeptic. I was pretty sure somebody in our group was playing with the board and trying to play a joke on the rest of us by moving the planchette. So I invited this spirit, so-called spirit, to possess me. Now, I don't advise anyone to do that. I don't advise myself to do that. I think that's, if you're a Christian, you know that's really a very terrible sin. I didn't know it at the time. And I was doing it mainly because I didn't believe in this thing, and I wanted to prove to myself and the rest of the group it was fake. So as soon as I made that invitation, I suddenly was really tired. And I said, I'm really tired all of a sudden. I'm just going to bed. So I went into my room and flopped on the bed, fully clothed, as sometimes I did back then, being some young guy, living in a basement suite, and just kind of that was the lifestyle. And as soon as I flopped on the bed, for the first time in my entire life, never happened before, my mattress started to vibrate underneath me. I thought, well, isn't that strange? And I wasn't actually afraid of this. I jumped up, put my hand on the wall, on the bed frame, on the floor, on the dresser, trying to see, is anything else vibrating? What's causing this? Nothing else was vibrating. Put my hand back on the mattress. It was still vibrating. So this had never happened to me in my life. And 120 seconds after inviting this spirit to possess me, my mattress starts vibrating. And I had been a Catholic briefly as a young teen. And even though I was an atheist by the time this happened. And so I prayed to God. I said, God, please forgive me for this terrible sin. I'm pretty sure this is a really bad sin. I take it back. I retract my permission. And what should I do? And it kind of came to my mind, I'm just going to destroy the board. So I went out of the room. Luckily, no one put up too much of an argument. We took the board to a park, found one of those metal barrels in the park, broke it up and put some newspaper under it and tried to burn it. And that was about the end of that. I didn't have any more vibrations or anything like that for a couple of years in a couple different apartments. Fast forward to when I'd gone back to school, getting my bachelor's degree. And I began to get a horror movie addiction going. And I was watching horror movies almost every night because I was building a large collection. A couple times a month, I'd watch The Real Gems with a friend of mine. But because I was building my collection, I had movies coming in almost daily, and I was trying to just get through them all. So I'm watching a lot of these by myself. And I had a roommate at the time, but he was out most of the time. And so watching these horror movies every single night began to really break me down psychologically, and I was getting more and more sort of afraid. And finally, it culminated one night in watching this particularly realistic and quite demonic movie. And for some reason, my fear was off the chart that night. It was just, I was so afraid. And when I went to sleep that night, the vibration came back. And it was very strong. And this time it didn't go away with the one night. It would vibrate a couple times a month for several months. And it would vibrate especially strong when I would be in a really bad mood. It would respond to me being in a bad mood. And occasionally it would follow me to work. Even my office chair sometimes would vibrate. And so I thought, what you're probably thinking right now is, oh, I was just nuts. That's all. It wasn't vibrating. I was just crazy. Well, I thought the same thing. I thought, well, am I imagining this? So one night when it started vibrating, I jumped up. My roommate happened to be home and awake and watching TV and sober. By the way, he was a master's student in biochemistry, so he wasn't an idiot, and he was, pretty reliable, intelligent guy. So I asked him, "Can you quickly come into my room, put your hand on my mattress, and tell me what you think?" So he thought, what a strange request, but he comes into my room, puts his hand on the mattress, and he said it felt like a quivering dog. So if you've ever had a dog and it comes in out of the cold and it's laying on the floor shivering, or maybe laying in front of a fire if you have a fireplace, and you put your hand on its belly and it's kind of a shivering dog. That's what he said the mattress felt like. And nothing else in the room was vibrating at all, of course. The frame, the floor, the furniture, nothing else, just the mattress. And interestingly, it was a futon mattress, so it didn't have any springs or anything in it, just some cotton batting, and that was about it. So there's really no physical reason why this would be happening. So that was quite strong evidence to me. It was direct evidence. It still wasn't enough to convince me that there was anything other than the human brain generating our consciousness. And again, I found another cupboard in my mind and I stuck it in there and went on with my life. So fast forward again, I don't know, a couple decades and a couple graduate degrees later, and a couple decades worth of research at this point. And my father, who had betrayed all of his older kids and older wives, really throughout his adult life. He's just not a nice person, quite a narcissist. And he had pulled us all back into his life when he found out he was dying of cancer, and he wanted support. So we were all comfortable not being in his life anymore, at least I was, and he sucked me back in. And of course, being empathetic, I went back and got back into, tried to have some kind of father-son relationship with him, but it was hard. But I thought we finally connected. And then just before he passed away, like within a couple weeks, he suddenly just wrote us all out of the will, except for his youngest daughter and his youngest wife. And it wasn't the money at all. I didn't care about the money. It was about the betrayal. It was about the signal it sent, that the only reason he sucked us back into his life at the end was to surround himself with quote unquote love, or what he thought was love. But at the end of the day, we were nothing to him. And really it was his youngest wife and youngest daughter. So this massive betrayal was quite devastating, because I felt like we had been trying to get some kind of relationship built in the last few months of his life. So I was being quite broken up about it. And as were the two older siblings who he had also betrayed. I was trying to compose on my phone via speech to text an email about this to try to put things in a perspective. And so I had a condo at the time and I'm living alone. So I'm talking aloud, really, into my phone to compose this email, and I would edit it later. But I was probably talking for 30 minutes about my father out loud in this empty room. Now this was within roughly a day and a half after he passed away. I don't believe it was the same day, and I don't think it was more than 2 days. I think it was a day and a half. You might wonder how we found out about the will so quickly. Well, my older sister had been digging a little bit in advance. So basically, the second he passed away, she knew about it, and we knew about it immediately. Otherwise, we wouldn't have found out for a little while. So I'm trying to compose this email saying, there's more to life than money, and he seemed different at the end. And I'm just doing my best to put it in perspective, but it was so hard. And I was so hurt by the whole thing. And so I couldn't really finish the email quickly. And then my friend calls me from the same building. He lived a couple floors down. And he wanted me to come down and help him with something in his computer room. So I said, oh, no problem. I'll be down in a second. Let me just quickly close up the fan. I'd been dusting out a fan in my bathroom. It's kind of a random thing, but hey, that's life. So I get back on the stepladder in my bathroom. I'm still talking to my friend. He's on speaker, and I put the phone on the edge of my bathroom counter. And as I'm talking to him, my phone just drops off the bathroom counter, just plunk. And in the back of my mind, I instantly thought, this might be my father reaching out. I just knew it. I felt it. But I didn't tell my friend that. Sound like some crazy person. So I told my friend, oh, that's interesting. My phone just fell off the counter. That's kind of weird. I was very casual about it. I picked up the phone. I went down the elevator. And like a minute later, I'm in his apartment, a couple floors down. And we're in his computer room where I was going to help him hang something on the wall. So I put my phone down on his computer desk to free up my hands. I don't know why I didn't put it in my pocket. I just didn't. I put it on his computer desk. I turned my back to the desk, and he's facing me. And over my shoulder, he's quite a tall guy. He could see my phone in the desk behind me, a few feet behind me, like at least 3 feet behind me. And then he's 2 feet in front of me. And then the phone's a foot on the desk. The phone's like 6 feet away from him. Probably 5 feet away from me. And we're talking for like 5 seconds. Okay, where do you want to hang such and such on the wall? And I hear this swish, kind of a shh type sound. And the phone flies horizontally off his computer desk, halfway across his computer room, passes my legs, and lands on the floor in between us. Now, I wasn't facing the phone, so I didn't see it fly across the room. I just saw it complete its flight, pass my legs below me, and then bounce on the floor in between our legs. He had seen it fly across the entire room because he was facing the phone at the time. And so we both knew immediately that had been my father sending a message. There was just no other rational explanation. It's just, there's no other physical explanation for what happened, especially statistically. I mean, even if you could come up with some insane explanation, and I think one person I told this to had some cockamamie idea, which I had actually thought of myself, believe it or not, although I knew it was ridiculous statistically. And that was that the molecules of air in like some region behind the phone having some temperature, and so randomly vibrating, all just somehow randomly synchronized. Now, I don't even know if that's physically possible, because the reason they're bouncing back and forth is they're bouncing off each other. So I don't even know if that's physically possible. Probably not. But even if it is, the probability of that happening is, I don't know, 10 to the negative 100 or something. I mean, it's some ridiculous, it's vanishingly low. It's basically zero. And then you combine it with the fact that 120 seconds earlier, my phone dropped off the desk. Combine that with the fact that my father had just passed away and leaving behind in this massive drama, which was just so devastating to all of us. I mean, it's just inescapable. There is persistence of consciousness after physical death. That is my conclusion. And I don't feel it's something I believe as much as it's something I have concluded. Now, to get from that to the belief in God and Jesus Christ, faith in God and Jesus Christ, that's another step I'm not going to go through in this video, but there are reasons for that. However, I will touch, and so that's the honest. So I will, however, touch on one scripture from the Bible, and this is a quote from Jesus Christ. When Thomas, one of his disciples, and you know the expression doubting Thomas. Well, if you're not a Christian or you haven't read the Bible, you may not be aware, but doubting Thomas is a biblical reference. Thomas was the disciple of Jesus who did not believe he had been resurrected and had wanted to see the wounds. And so when Jesus showed himself to Thomas, Thomas fell to his face and said, Lord, Lord. And then from the scriptures, Jesus saith unto him, Thomas, because thou hast seen me, thou hast believed. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed. And that's from John chapter 20, verse 29. And so I'm sorry to say I'm a doubting Thomas, as I believe a lot of scientists are. I think the more educated I became in the mathematics and the sciences, the more doubting Thomas I was, and I'm sorry about that. And, I don't think it was Jesus himself who presented that evidence to me. I think somehow it was my Father's Spirit delaying moving on. I think you can delay that to some extent. This is what I've understood from certain near-death experience testimonies. And I think he did. And I think the reason my father did that was he left such a lot of pain in his wake. And he probably regretted that to some extent and thought he would send a message. And not only do I forgive him for writing me out of the will. I mean, man, that's nothing. If he had written me out of the will and he had left me $1 billion, which it was not $1 billion, believe me, but had it been $1 billion, I still would never trade that. I would not trade the message he sent me for any amount of money, because I was an absolute doubting Thomas. I needed evidence. And so my conclusion is there is persistence of consciousness after physical death. Next month, I'm going to get into some other topics. I'm going to try to do about one topic per month, give or take, from the atheistic as well as newborn Christian, because I am now a newborn Christian. I've read the entire Bible. I'm pretty newborn. I'm not an expert in Christianity. And I have that scientific background and that logical mind. And so I'm going to try to present about one topic per month from that perspective. So please stay tuned. Thanks for watching Evidentiary Christianity. If you want us help to support us via Bitcoin, that's our Bitcoin address right there. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.